second day, and thus far, all has gone well. I'm Scott Murray. David
Dave,
Hamilton, how are you, my friend?
very good. I appreciate you doing all this for us,
Good.
sir.
No, it's labor of love, as they say. David calls, we have to perform.
Well, you're kind. So we just came out of a break. We're going to start our programming up again. We've got some great people from NCI. Brad Mascho is going to moderate a discussion. I'll be introducing him in a second. I just want to do a quick shout out and thank you to NCI, Julian Larson, and others who have been very helpful in this whole process. Been a big supporter, and the work that they're doing is really important. So I'd like to bring Brad on if we can now and introduce him, have him talk a little bit about his company, et cetera, and then the little discussion that he's going to have with his cohort here, his colleagues. So, hey there, how you doing, sir? Can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me, David?
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Glad to be with you today, and glad to have a couple of my colleagues on as well.
Well, we're glad you're here, and what we'd like to do is spend a little as much time, with the transitions, et cetera, because I think people really want to hear what you guys have to say, and I just want to thank you. So, why don't you go ahead and take it away, and we'll get out of your hair, and we'll come back at towards the end of your conversation.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thanks again, David. My name is Brad Mascho. I'm the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer for NCI, and I'll tell you about NCI in a moment. But before I did, I wanted to thank you for tuning in to this conversation. And I just want to take a moment to frame our discussion and introduce some of my teammates who are going to be on here with me. Also, I'd like to encourage anyone who's listening, feel free to ask any questions. I think Zoom has a pretty good chat functionality, and we'll be monitoring that throughout our discussion today. So we would certainly love to make this as interactive as possible. I'm calling this a conversation today because I truly hope that's what it is. It really is a conversation between three friends. My teammates on this call all come with pretty distinguished backgrounds and a very big, broad depth of knowledge. So we decided that instead of spending 30 minutes reviewing slides or speaking at you, we would treat this more as a conversation on innovation, and we're gonna focus that in the AI space. Obviously, it's a big focus for a lot of folks out there. From in the public sector, there is an executive order prioritizing AI development. AI is one of the national 7 imperatives of the National Defense Strategy. The Pentagon has a joint AI center. Agencies left and right are hiring chief AI officers and chief data officers. And really the government has made prioritizing shifting from low value to high value work, and really that's focused around AI. So that's why we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about innovation and AI. With that, I'm gonna introduce my two teammates on here with me. The first teammate I'd like to introduce today is Bubba Fox. Bubba is the Chief Product Officer and SVP for NCI, where he leads all of our product strategy and product development. He brings 2 decades of leadership, technology, and product experience, beginning with his career as an Air Force intelligence officer, and most recently serving as the CEO of a leading healthcare AI technology company.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Bubba. My second teammate here is Jen Hoover. Jen is the Director of Digital Transformation for NCI, where she really helps us lead and drive all of our digital transformation strategy and innovation for our public sector clients. Prior to NCI, Jen spent almost a decade in the public sector, most recently serving as the Deputy Director of the Office of Venture and Innovation for the Department of Homeland Security. Thanks for joining, Jen.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone.
So before I jump into our conversation today, I did want to introduce you to NCI for those of you that have not heard of us or worked with us previously. For 30 years, NCI has been a trusted service provider for customers like the Defense Department, CMS, FCC, DHS, and more. Today, NCI works to empower each of those customers and many more across the government with AI-powered solutions. We're using AI to improve efficiency and productivity, reduce costs, allow our customers to buy more mission. We're using AI in nearly every current or proposed program across the public sector. So this is not just talking about AI, but we actually do I'm going to try to bring up a slide if I'm able here, because I think it might not be able to. That's all right. I'll go without it. So there is the way we're going to frame our discussion today is around 3 core areas, and then we're going to throw in a bonus at the end here. We're looking at innovation from people, process, and technology. From the people side, the slide I wanted to use, I often use this in conversations, is if anyone's familiar with Ghostbusters, there's a scene in the Ghostbusters where they're briefing the mayor, and all of them are all excited about everything that's happening. And at the end, Dr. Venkman ends the scene with just the best lines. It's human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. And I have to tell you that sometimes these conversations around AI and innovation feel like mass hysteria. When you think of the hype around AI versus reality, and you get outside of Skynet and Terminator, or HAL in 2001: Space Odyssey, there's plenty of hype around the around AI and around AI singularity. But we want to take and know that that is our backdrop, know that that's what we're up against when we talk about innovation and AI, and really knowing that that's in the back of people's minds, shift to how we can diminish their fears. So I wanted to start with a question for my teammate Jen, and just ask, what are the ways you've seen people react to AI and innovation? What are the best practices for people integrating innovative technologies with people like this?
So the really interesting thing about innovation and technology, I think, so I worked at Customs and Border Protection starting in 2010. And whenever I was there, we started rolling out this whole brand new exciting program called Agile Technology, or Agile Methodologies. And I was on the first Agile program. And then I became an evangelist for getting our application development teams to adopt Agile, and in the same right, DevSecOps, and starting to automate their development. And a lot of, from the hands-on keyboard, people were like, we don't have time to change. We've done it this way always. And it was very challenging for them to be able to think through, well, how is this going to make things better? Because I have to learn this whole new thing. And of course, Agile isn't an innovative technology, but it was at the time an innovative methodology of how to do things. So one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing is talking with the hands-on keyboard folks around how it would make their job easier and allow them to open up their time and availability to be able to tackle more complicated things in shorter, smaller pieces, which was really the key component of it. And then speaking with the middle management level, because their mindset is, I have a mission to complete. Like, I have to address the mission. I don't have time to change our methodology. So it's very much about explaining how shifting to this new methodology would allow them to meet those mission needs better and faster. In that same regard, today we're looking at machine learning and AI, which, like you said, Brad, is very much, like, oh, the robots are going to take over. But it's not about that. I like to say it's taking the robot out of the human. It allows the people to use their brains to think and do more high value work, and explaining it to the various levels, like middle management and hands-on keyboard and executive management, in the way that's most relevant to them. So for example, I know, especially heavy in DoD, it's all about the mission. It's all about making sure that we can drive this mission forward. And so I find that sometimes it's easiest to explain, this technology might be uncomfortable to adopt, but it's going to allow your people to use their brains to make the really important decisions that, as of right now, machine learning and AI can't really make those decisions without concerns around ethical AI and potential decision-making capabilities that humans can make better today, and especially in the DoD space, it's really important that we have humans there to use their brain and not just button pushing. And then help people on, our hands-on keyboard people who are having to use this technology, that it's not here to take away your job. It's here to empower you. It's here to help you evolve into a better decision-making human and spend less time pushing a button and potentially having to go back and correct mistakes, which a robot isn't going to make, but a human can. So it's really about helping people to understand at whatever level they're at, the most relevant way that it's going to impact them in a positive way and not to take away their jobs, which is so often what I hear from people. Oh, you're going to automate me right out of a job. Well, we're going to automate the menial tasks, sure, but it's going to allow you to skill up and be better and be more valuable to your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Completely agree. It was actually the first comment I heard on my first day at NCI when I was going around talking to people as the chief AI officer was, oh, there were folks that responded and said, are you here to get rid of my job? And the answer is obviously no. It's not what we're here to do. We're here to help you upskill. We're here to I love the idea of take the robot out of the human. There's a Gartner study that has shown that over that in the next 10 years or so, there's obviously going to be a workforce disruption when it comes to AI, and there is going to be a shift of positions when it comes to AI, but it doesn't mean that you're going to see less jobs. You're just going to see a different type of job. A good example of that, if you look back 150, 200 years ago, at agriculture used to make up 80 to 90% of the workforce was in some way involved in farming, and then as you look at it today, it's somewhere around 2 to 4% of the workforce. Doesn't mean we've consumed less food, and it doesn't mean that the 75% of people are out of work. It means that they've shifted into other work. With some disruption, but I think everyone would see it as a net positive over where we were 150, 200 years ago.
I saw this article, it was a couple years ago. I want to say it was 2016, 2017. I can find it and share it with everyone, that said something like 70% of jobs in the year 2030 have not yet been invented. So it's very much, and I think it was Forbes or Wired, something like that. I'll have to find the article, but yeah, it's not that we're trying to take the jobs away using AI and machine learning. It's that there are new jobs coming and there's this opportunity to skill up the workforce, like I said, to be better.
Right. Bubba, you like to focus on kind of that bottoms up innovation, and obviously with your background in as an intelligence officer and all of your defense work that you've done, what have you experienced when it comes to bottom up innovation versus top down, and have you seen one way that is more advantageous to the broader workforce?
It's from one perspective and one person's opinion. Listening to the conversations this morning, when you have Captain Fuchs talking about focus the workforce to understand the problem first. Then you also have the Army talking about project convergence. So they know, again, focus on the problems together. And while they created a system that connected the sensor and the shooter, what I think bottoms up innovation and the way the Defense Department's advantage, but also disadvantage is two things. Let me explain. Consider the average age of our military. 34 and a half years is the average age for officers, 27 for our enlisted corps. And if you're going to have that old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, take a team. So I think what I would urge so much, and the lessons learned from where we instituted AI across U.S. healthcare systems, which are predominantly siloed, we can do the same thing in the Defense Department by creating the culture and understanding where your best ideas are going to come from those people that are doing the processes every day. But we need to help them create a greater capacity. So if we first remove those barriers where a human is just charged with routing information from A to B, let's create greater capacity, which over time then provides them the ability to upskill based on new technologies. But it goes to the question, how does a soldier or an airman know that a great project is being done by the Jake, for example? How do they know that it's an enhanced capability that is been created? Or we've all been there, if you wore in the uniform, where what you did downrange felt amazing. You know it made an impact, but you're going to go to the next job, you PCS, or you retire and leave. I don't believe that the knowledge and the ability of that AI should also leave with you. So as we develop AI within the Defense Department, it needs to almost have a lasting capability that, one, creates awareness that a problem is being tackled. Please join in, provide your perspective, and let's come up with a common framework of how to solve the problem. And the two, that it endures longer than a person's tour within that particular seat, so that their expertise doesn't leave with them as they transition and retire and move on. Instead, we continuously build on what was already done, so we don't have to make the same mistakes again and again, and again in this service, and again in another service, just to get to that level where we could all be if we had the total awareness of the shared commonalities, the shared perspectives, and the benefits that AI provides to create that marketplace, the DoD's app store, so that's when they know that the F-16 unit down at Shaw has done something amazing. Why can't that same capability be available in Korea? As soon as we get into that framework, man, we'll be ahead, because I'm telling you, the US doesn't have as much time as we have to go project by project. We have to collaborate together because we're running out of time to get this right. And I think, again, yes, you can go fast if you go alone, but I think we can go faster and farther by bringing smart people together to solve common problems that exist across the services.
Oh, I feel like that is very well said, and something that I imagine if you look at the history of the Defense Department, you look at, maybe even more recent history in the last 60, 70 years or so, with folks constantly moving from one location to another, that lack of continuity of knowledge. You can only write and read so many SOPs and playbooks, right? That has to be an ongoing, almost an ongoing threat.
When in the Air Force, and each service has their patchwares, their weapons school grads, we would have to wait for the first 2 weeks of January every year to have the weapons officers congregate together to get the best practices and the processes and the knowledge that was learned. What if you could create a system that had that continuously, so that we're constantly iterating on problems that are being solved, so that we can move at machine speed with machine help? But you're not replacing the human workforce, because if you go in and think that you're creating a software that is, again, the black box solution, I think that's the wrong way to approach it. From lessons learned of how we were able to say the Cleveland Clinic is the best heart hospital in America because they figured this out, why doesn't that knowledge get shared across all health systems? Why does the Cleveland Clinic only get the distinction of having the best heart hospital when those people down in Texas probably need that same capability? The Defense Department is the same way. We have figured out the problems. They're just so stovepiped and hidden in all of the great people that are in our military today that don't yet have the opportunity to share the lessons that they've learned. And I think we can do that. Then I think we'll all move faster together. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Bubba. What about when it comes, let's shift into the process discussion and let's look at how you actually roll these out. Once you've gotten people maybe won over some of the hearts and minds to be able to bring this in. There's a lot of different ways you can go about bringing AI and innovation into a customer. And you've obviously got a lot of experience with that. Bubba, what has been your experience with the different ways that people can go about bringing on AI capabilities, and maybe some of the benefits, negatives, if you have them?
It's almost like AI isn't only for rocket scientists. What I'm most proud of is General Hayden. Michael Hayden was a history grad like myself, but yet he was in charge of America's best and most technologically advanced agencies, that being the NSA. So what you have to do is, much like Lieutenant General Sharpie said earlier, is that interoperability and the understanding that you're the blue suitor in the room. I too spent most of my career with the Army. And the only way that you're going to be able to have a voice amongst many that have been trained a certain way is to provide value and understand your benefit. And I think the three ways that I would offer for people to consider adopting AI is the first, they can go it alone. And if you go it alone, what you risk there is, while you'll be able to have those internal processes and understand your cost. But what will happen is, because everyone now has an RPA platform, you've created the world where the same automation is going to be created 50,000 times, and it could break 50,000 times instead of centralizing it. Or by going it alone, you risk perpetuating, well, that's the way we've always done it here, and you're not yet applying best practices. And that's when most people then bring in those consultants that say, look, we're process experts, we're going to help you. And they then bring along a software. So now what you're dealing with is this significant initial investment of this platform and the consultative services. And what it's going to require is that consultant to bring on other multiple software vendors to constantly fix the problems as you continue to grow adoption within the organization. And there's no benefit across multiple organizations that information gets shared, because then that takes away from the consultant's next contract. Instead, the third is what we call AI as a service. And it's a fixed structure service to where it's incentivized to make sure that the capabilities that are built by a particular vendor, and they have their own AI capabilities that they can both engineer and evolve to get better. Therefore, the tide of learning, when you have a partner that is considered AI as a service, who's with you along the journey that it's going to take, that lessons learned, the tide raises all boats across the organization, because then that vendor has greater success, and you're able then to work with multiple vendors, and you're avoiding the data moats and the technology moats that most contract companies prefer. But instead, the best way to go about this is take the best from from academia, from commercial, so that we can all work together and make it a better outcome for the Defense Department by bringing together under one platform, like the DoD Platform One is really doing great work on, but to make sure that you're also sitting with the process experts and getting better and better at just the back office stuff that, again, like Jen said, robs you, that creates makes humans the robots. And so there's three ways. It's do it yourself, software plus the consultant, or an all-in a vendor that has their own platform that then has a desire to evolve it and make it better.
Great, thanks, Bubba. Jen, we at NCI use a number of different processes to approach innovation, and everything from our shape process to our digital developer process. But I've also heard you talk about, something more simple, just kind of crawl, walk, run. When is it better to use or to think about a simple process versus something more maybe complex and multi-step?
So, Brad, I'll start with a fun little backstory. I was at the Transportation Security Administration for part of my career, and one of the things they had me do, and I'll tell you, I love process improvement. It's kind of my jam. I'm super nerdy about it. But they said, well, we want to make the ITAR process simpler. And so the first thing we did was we looked at the ITAR process from beginning to end, and we put it on a piece of paper that was about the size of the wall behind me. I mean, it was gigantic. All of these different areas. And what we found is there's the ITAR process, and then there's all these little sub processes that are associated with it, various levels of approval. And if it's this dollar amount, it goes this way. If it's this dollar amount, it goes this way. And so we looked at this massive process. And we're like, I don't know, where do you start? So I like to use crawl, walk, run in the way that you take really small, easy processes that can be automated, like creating an account. It's a pretty simple, basic process. It doesn't take long to automate, and it actually affects a lot of people, but it is generally very simple, especially because those processes are generally laid out already. And it's a very simple thing to do. So that has a large effect. So the value of automating such a simple, seemingly simple thing will immediately help. And this goes back to people. It helps the users and the customers, the users who are getting the accounts, your internal customer, the people who have to create the accounts, and it helps them get comfortable with the idea that we're going to automate these various processes and make things easier for them, and allows them to focus on the one-off situations. But if you look at a gigantic process like the one that I did at TSA, you don't know where to start. You're looking at an 80-step process with 37 sub processes that just seems, it looks heavy, because it is heavy, and you don't know where to start and where your value is going to come from by automating bits and pieces of the much larger process. So that's why with the crawl, walk, run, what we found, so, and Brad, you know this, one of the things that I've done internally with NCI is starting to automate our internal processes. And what we found is we got tons of complaints, like the onboarding process is such a pain. And so what we started doing was we were like, well, it would be easy to automate account creation. And that made one piece of a very large process a little bit simpler. And then we're like, well, it'd also be easy to be able to take the information from this system and put it in this system from onboarding. And so once we were able to automate a single thing, we realized that there were, like, a single small thing, we realized there were tons and tons of other little things that are inherently connected. And so by starting with a crawl, you start to realize there's so much more out there, and then you can start to touch on each thing. And so before you know it, you're running, and you have this gigantic process that if you sat it down on day one and looked at it, it looks so big and unreasonable to be able to simplify that. Because I don't always go straight to automation. I always say, let's optimize and automate, garbage in, garbage out, which is not what you want to do. So taking it into tiny little pieces and automate over time makes you realize that at the end of, say, like an onboarding process, you look at the greater thing on the piece of paper that's the size of the wall behind me, and you're like, oh, well, we've not only automated a bunch of it, now our HR people can focus on things that require human interaction, but we've also optimized the hell out of it, and it's become a better process with oftentimes less unnecessary steps that somebody put in over time. And well, that's the way we've always done it. So you're optimizing from little and moving to big. So you're not boiling the ocean, and you prioritize those things. So it just becomes a lot easier when you start small, and getting the human buy-in from the people who are making the adjustments to their processes, um, becomes a lot easier too, because they get to see the small wins. And I'm also a big fan of, if there are small wins, small things, shout it from the rooftop, make it a big deal, because you're going to start seeing those small wins get bigger and bigger and bigger until you have a mountain of small wins and a gigantic process like the ITAR process or the onboarding process. And now you have a very optimized, an optimized gigantic process that affects tens of thousands of people potentially. So that's my crawl, walk, run motto.
Oh, I appreciate it. One of the things as I was listening to you, and I know we're getting close on time here, so we're gonna shift to the tools and the bonus if we have time. But from a tool perspective, I was thinking about your crawl, walk, run, and really with our approach around people, processes, and technology. I think if you were to pie chart it, the people is the crawl. That's really where we have to spend a lot of time getting them comfortable with what's going to happen. And the process is really, once you've gotten to that point, you can start to work through a process. And then, that last piece when you can really start to run is the technology. And, I'd like to ask Bubba as a chief product officer, when you look at individual tools and when you consider innovation, what are the types of considerations that come in with those tools, and really increasing capacity in a workforce?
Brad, I'll make this quick because I know we're running out of time. What I will say is, regardless of the tool, you have to create the culture and the ability to run and repeat the data, information, knowledge, and wisdom of every process in order to really truly scale AI. It's no good if one group of people are assisted based on jobs as AFSC, MOS, because they're going to leave that particular job or the service altogether, and we're stuck in the same stage of the OODA loop repeatedly, having to make the same mistakes. Instead, to truly scale the AI, once it's adopted within the DoD, the lessons learned and the repeatable processes must be constantly federated across the widest group of those professionals to know what was done, who then can iterate and constantly improve both the human and the digital workforces, so that you'll know which tools and processes you need to now adopt, that Jen spoke about. That's why technology, whatever is decided, must create a network effect, not merely single AI projects built and used in isolation. It'll take too long, and the US doesn't have the kind of time to get the implementation of AI right. We really have to start focusing on that capability of the network effect and the ability for greater collaboration, so that we can iterate and iterate and iterate. So that'll then help us mature both our technology, but also mature our human workforce to understand the benefits that AI can offer them, so they can be a part of the solution.
That's spot on, Bubba. And I know we are about to wrap up here, but I did want to mention we had a question from a panelist, and this was really for you, Bubba, but it goes to what you were saying here at the end, and this was going to be kind of our bonus topic anyway, was the risk of inaction around AI. And this panelist, or the question came in about China's World Intelligence Congress and their focus on AI. As we know, Russia has said they are going to be that whoever is the leader in AI is going to be the ruler of the world. China has said they're going to focus and make Chinese AI the top AI by 2030. You've got the JAIC, you've got congressionally mandated commissions on AI. So we have a lot of focus on this right now. So I guess I just leave it with how high is that risk of inaction? I think everyone here on this call would say it's pretty extremely high. It's something that we hear about on a daily basis. But I know we're about to wrap up here. I did want to throw that out there as a parting shot for everyone, that that risk of inaction when it comes to AI is significant, and possibly the most significant risk of inaction that we've seen in several decades here.
Well, thank you so much, Brad, Jennifer, and Bubba. I want to say that that was not just an important discussion. It is a existential discussion. I don't think you can elevate how important AI and our ability to iterate faster, work together better, collaborate, et cetera, is. So that's an absolutely vital discussion. And it made my old Lean Six Sigma operational excellence heart sing to hear people talk about speed, reducing waste, not just reiterating the same process and automating the same process. I want you to know, as an old OpEx dimming guy, that made me really, really happy. And so I love to hear that sort of thing in the work that you're doing. Hail out agile. Let's be more agile, right? So appreciate you guys.